When I first applied for the summer job at the lakeside resort, I thought it would be the perfect way to earn some money before college while also enjoying a bit of freedom away from home. The resort was a popular destination, especially during July and August, with families, tourists, and wedding parties filling the cabins and restaurant every week. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, just long shifts, tips that would hopefully cover my textbooks in the fall, and maybe a few new friends to stay in touch with afterward. It sounded simple enough until the very first day, when I met the one person who would change that summer completely. The staff orientation took place in a big wooden hall overlooking the lake, the kind of rustic place decorated with string lights that looked magical in the evenings. I walked in a little nervous, clutching my welcome packet, scanning the room for an empty chair. That's when I noticed her. She was already sitting near the front, leaning back casually like she owned the room, her hair perfectly styled despite the humidity. She had this confident smile, almost like a smirk, as if she knew everyone's secrets before they said a word. Her name was Vanessa. At first, she seemed just like any other new coworker. When the manager, Mr. Dalton, introduced us all and went around asking about our roles, Vanessa cheerfully explained that she'd be working in guest services at the front desk. I was assigned to the restaurant team, waiting tables and helping with events. Nothing about that sounded conflicting, so I didn't think much of her. But there was something in the way she looked at me, a quick up and down glance that felt less like curiosity and more like a challenge. I brushed it off, convincing myself I was imagining it. The first week went smoothly. I learned how to carry trays stacked with drinks without spilling them, how to smile politely when guests made impossible requests, and how to keep moving even after 8 hours on my feet. I got along well with most of the staff, especially with a girl named Hannah, who was my age and equally new to the chaos of customer service. Together, we shared jokes in the back room and whispered about which guests left the worst tips. Life at the resort was tiring but manageable. Vanessa, meanwhile, didn't cross my path much, except for those occasional looks in the break room. She never said much to me, but somehow, I always felt like she was sizing me up. That changed during one particularly busy Saturday evening. The restaurant was packed with a wedding party, and I was juggling orders when Mr. Dalton suddenly appeared, asking for someone to run a last-minute errand for the front desk. Before I could duck out of sight, his eyes landed on me. "Can you deliver this packet to the main office? Vanessa needs it." I nodded, grateful for the excuse to breathe outside the noisy dining room for 5 minutes. When I got to the desk, Vanessa was there, of course, her polished smile firmly in place as she checked in a group of guests. When she saw me, though, that smile shifted slightly, like she was amused by something only she understood. I handed her the packet, and instead of a simple thanks, she leaned in closer and said, "So, you're the one they've been talking about." Her voice was smooth but sharp enough to make me pause. "Don't worry," she added quickly, "I like to know my competition." Then she turned back to the guests, dismissing me like I was just another staff member passing through. I walked away unsettled. Competition? For what? We weren't even in the same department, and it wasn't like there was a contest for who could smile the longest at cranky tourists. I tried to laugh it off when I told Hannah later, but even she raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like she's trying to get under your skin," Hannah said, stirring her iced coffee. "Maybe just ignore her." Ignoring her, however, wasn't so easy. Over the next week, I started noticing strange little things. A tray of drinks I'd left balanced on the counter, suddenly tipping over when I came back to pick it up. A guest complaining that their food order was wrong when I knew I had written it down correctly. Mr. Dalton calling me into his office to question why certain receipts were missing from my station. Nothing serious enough to accuse anyone of sabotage, but it was enough to make me question myself. Every mistake seemed to happen when Vanessa was nearby. Still, I couldn't prove anything, and I didn't want to sound paranoid. The summer job was important to me, not only for the money but also because I wanted to show my parents I could handle responsibility before leaving for college. So I kept my head down, double-checked everything I did, and tried not to let Vanessa's smirk get to me. But one night, near the end of July, something happened that I couldn't ignore. It was close to midnight, and the staff was cleaning up after a long banquet. Most people had gone home, but I stayed behind to finish rolling silverware with Hannah. When she left to catch her ride, I lingered another few minutes to wipe down my section. As I carried the last stack of plates into the kitchen, I noticed a shadow moving near the office door down the hall. Curious, I walked closer, and that's when I saw her. Vanessa was inside Mr. Dalton's office, the door slightly ajar, rifling through a drawer with a flashlight in her hand. I froze, my heart hammering. She wasn't supposed to be there, and she definitely wasn't supposed to be digging through files in the middle of the night. I knew I should turn around and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but before I could move, the floor creaked under my shoes. Vanessa's head snapped up, and our eyes met through the crack in the door. Her expression shifted instantly from surprise to something much colder. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about some petty workplace rivalry. Whatever Vanessa was doing in that office, it was bigger than I had imagined, and somehow, I had just walked straight into it. The silence in that hallway stretched longer than it should have, my pulse so loud in my ears that I almost didn't hear her whisper my name. "You didn't see anything," Vanessa said quietly, slipping the flashlight into her pocket with a movement so smooth it felt rehearsed. She pulled the office door shut behind her and stepped into the hall, her confident smile firmly back in place, as if she had only been doing something as harmless as checking a thermostat. But I knew what I saw, and it wasn't harmless. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You shouldn't be in there. That's Mr. Dalton's office." She tilted her head, almost amused, and walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking against the floor. "And you shouldn't be snooping around at midnight," she countered. Funny how we both ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her words carried a warning, like she was reminding me that she could make trouble for me too. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand an explanation, but something about the way she held eye contact froze me in place. Instead, I muttered a quick whatever and hurried off toward the kitchen, pretending like I hadn't seen anything. My hands shook as I scrubbed the last plates, replaying the scene in my mind. What was she looking for? Why would she risk her job to dig through Dalton's files? The next morning, everything seemed normal. Vanessa was at the front desk greeting guests like the perfect employee, her smile flawless, her tone cheerful. If anyone had asked, they would have believed she was the star of the summer staff. I kept glancing at her, waiting for some slip-up, but she gave me nothing. It was like the midnight incident had never happened. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I was getting pulled into something I didn't understand. I tried telling Hannah, but the words stuck in my throat. How was I supposed to explain catching Vanessa in Dalton's office without sounding like I was exaggerating or inventing a story? Hannah would probably think I was overreacting, maybe even jealous of Vanessa's confidence. So instead, I kept it to myself, though the weight of that secret made every shift feel heavier. But then small things started happening again, things I couldn't write off as coincidences anymore. Guest complaints somehow getting pinned on me, even when I knew I hadn't made the mistake. Tips disappearing from the shared jar after my shift. Notes left on the bulletin board in handwriting suspiciously like mine, with errors that got me called into Dalton's office for a warning. Vanessa always nearby, always smiling. One night, as I was leaving the staff quarters, I overheard voices around the corner. Vanessa's was one of them, smooth and low, but she wasn't speaking to another staff member. The second voice was unfamiliar, deeper, and impatient. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. Documents, doesn't suspect. And 2 weeks, my stomach twisted as I realized she wasn't just stirring up workplace drama, she was involved in something that clearly reached beyond the resort. I didn't have proof, only bits and pieces, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started watching her closely, paying attention to where she went when she wasn't at the desk. A couple of times, I noticed her slipping into the office after hours again, always making sure to leave no trace. I thought about going to Mr. Dalton, but if he didn't believe me, I'd risk being fired, and if he did believe me without evidence, Vanessa would know I had betrayed her. The strangest part was that despite everything, she never outright threatened me. Instead, she acted almost friendly. She'd ask me how my shifts were going, offer me a ride back to the staff cabins, even compliment my work in front of Dalton. On the surface, she looked like an ally, but her eyes always gave her away calm on the outside, calculating on the inside. It was like she was playing two different roles, and I was the only one who knew which mask was real. Then came the night. That changed everything. The resort hosted a charity gala for local donors, one of the biggest events of the season. Every staff member was pulled in to help servers, bartenders, even the front desk crew. I was running back and forth carrying trays when I spotted Vanessa, slipping out through the side door in a dress that wasn't part of the uniform. She wasn't carrying anything obvious, just a small clutch, but something about her urgency made me set down my tray and follow. Outside, the path curved toward the lake, quiet except for the chirping of crickets. I stayed far enough behind that she wouldn't notice me, my heart pounding so hard I worried she'd hear it. She walked straight to the dock where a man in a dark jacket was waiting. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the way they greeted each other like co-conspirators who had done this before confirmed my fears. They spoke in hushed tones, passing something between them that glinted under the faint light. I stepped closer, just enough to hear snippets. The man said, "This is the last batch. After this, we're clear." Vanessa nodded, her voice calm. "Good. She won't say anything. She knows better." It took me a moment to realize who she was. My stomach dropped. They were talking about me. I stumbled back, my shoe crunching against the gravel, and their heads turned instantly. Vanessa's eyes locked onto mine across the dock, and for the first time since I met her, her smile vanished completely. The air around the lake suddenly felt colder, though it was the middle of July. I froze where I stood, my body half hidden behind a tree, my mind racing too fast to decide whether to run or confront her. Vanessa took a slow step toward me on the dock, her heels clicking softly on the wood, and though she didn't shout, her voice carried enough authority to slice through the night. "You shouldn't be here." The man beside her glanced at me with irritation, muttering something I couldn't catch, before shoving his hands in his jacket pockets and walking quickly in the opposite direction down the shoreline. That left only Vanessa and me, with the lake glimmering between us, the crickets going silent like they knew this wasn't just a casual encounter. I wanted to say something, anything that would prove I wasn't scared, but my throat felt tight. "What are you doing?" I finally managed, though it came out quieter than I intended. Vanessa tilted her head, studying me the way a cat studies a bird before deciding whether to pounce. "The better question," she said smoothly, "is, what are you going to do now that you've seen something you shouldn't?" The implication was clear, but the calmness in her tone unsettled me more than if she had yelled. She wasn't panicking, she wasn't scrambling for excuses, she was perfectly in control. I took a shaky step back, trying to hold her gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, hoping denial would keep me out of whatever mess she was involved in. But she didn't buy it. Her smirk returned, just slightly, and she walked past me without another word, her perfume lingering in the night air as if to remind me she wasn't afraid of me telling anyone. For the next couple of days, I kept waiting for something to happen. Maybe Dalton would call me into his office and accuse me of snooping. Maybe Vanessa would confront me with some kind of threat. Maybe the strange man from the dock would reappear. But nothing did. Everything on the surface remained the same: guests checking in, tables to serve, Hannah laughing with me in the back room about silly customer complaints. And yet, I couldn't relax, because I knew Vanessa hadn't forgotten what I saw. The tension started affecting my work. I dropped plates, forgot drink orders, and caught myself staring out the window more often than not, waiting for her to make her next move. Hannah noticed, of course, and asked me what was wrong, but I brushed her off with excuses about being tired. I wanted to tell her the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Something told me that once I involved someone else, things would escalate. Then, one afternoon, while organizing menus in the storage room, I found an envelope wedged between the shelves. My name was written on it in neat handwriting. Inside was a single folded note. Stop following me. Last warning. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. My hands shook as I held the paper, a wave of dread washing over me. She knew. I'd been near the dock. She knew I was still thinking about what I saw, and now she was warning me directly. I could have gone to Dalton right then, shown him the note, told him everything. But part of me wondered if he'd even believe me. Vanessa had worked her charm on everyone, especially him, and I couldn't shake the fear that if I accused her without solid proof, I'd be the one sent home. So I kept the note hidden, stuffed, in the bottom of my bag, and decided I needed to find out what she was really up to before making my move. A few days later, I got my chance. Vanessa called in sick for her shift, which surprised everyone because she'd been flawless up until then, never missing a day. With her desk empty, Dalton asked me to cover briefly while the other receptionist finished paperwork. Sitting at her station felt strange, like walking into enemy territory, but as I flipped through the reservation log, something caught my eye. In the drawer beneath the desk, half buried under brochures, was a small black notebook. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were lists, names, dates, amounts of money. At first, I thought it was some kind of personal budget, but then I recognized a few of the names. They weren't staff, they were guests. Guests who had attended some of the private events Vanessa had helped organize, and next to their names were figures that didn't look like tips or invoices. They looked like payments. Before I could study it further, I heard footsteps approaching. My heart jumped as I shoved the notebook back into the drawer and slid into my chair like nothing had happened. It was Dalton, thanking me for covering. I forced a smile, praying he couldn't see the panic written all over my face. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the numbers, the way Vanessa had spoken with that man at the dock, the note she left me. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't small. She was keeping records, which meant it was organized, deliberate. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she probably already suspected that I had seen the notebook. My fears were confirmed the next evening. I was on my way back to the cabins when I found Vanessa waiting for me at the path, leaning casually against a tree as if she had been expecting me. "We need to talk," she said simply, her smile absent this time. I tried to walk past her, but she stepped in front of me. "Don't play games. You've been watching me, and I don't like it. But here's the thing, you don't understand what's really going on. If you did, you wouldn't be so eager to paint me as the villain." Her words caught me off guard. I had expected denial, maybe another threat, but not this calm, almost persuasive tone. I asked her what she meant, but she only shook her head. "Let's just say there are things about this place you don't know, and if you're smart, you'll stay out of it. Otherwise, you're going to find out the hard way." And then, without another word, she walked away, leaving me standing in the dark, more confused than ever. Because as much as I hated to admit it, there was something in her voice, a flicker of truth that made me wonder if she wasn't lying at all. The following week, I couldn't focus on anything else. Her words kept replaying in my mind, over and over, as if she deliberately planted them there. "There are things about this place you don't know." At first, I thought it was just another manipulation, a way to keep me second-guessing myself, but the longer I worked at the resort, the more I began noticing small details I had never paid attention to before. The deliveries that came late at night, signed for quietly by someone at the front desk. The same group of wealthy guests returning every weekend, though they never booked through the online system like normal customers. The way Dalton always seemed more stressed after these particular groups left, but never spoke about it to anyone. I started connecting dots, though they didn't form a complete picture yet. It wasn't just about Vanessa being sneaky or sabotaging my shifts. Something bigger was happening, and I was caught in the middle simply because I had seen too much. Hannah, of course, noticed my distraction. She teased me at first, asking if I had a secret crush or if I was sneaking around with one of the lifeguards, but eventually her jokes turned to concern. "You're not yourself," she said one evening while we stacked chairs after closing. "You're jumpy, you're quiet, and you look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" I wanted so badly to tell her everything, but every time I opened my mouth, I pictured Vanessa's cold eyes on that dock, the notebook hidden in the drawer, the warning note. If I involved Hannah, she could get dragged into it too. So I lied, again, saying I was just nervous about college starting soon. It wasn't until the night of the staff bonfire that things escalated. Every summer, Dalton threw a party by the lake for the workers, a way to boost morale during the busiest part of the season. Music played, food was set out, people laughed and danced under the stars. For a few hours, it actually felt like we were just a group of teenagers and 20-somethings having fun, not cogs in an exhausting hospitality machine. I tried to relax, sitting with Hannah and a few others by the fire, roasting marshmallows. But my peace didn't last long. Across the flames, I spotted Vanessa, standing a little apart from the group. She wasn't laughing, wasn't mingling, just watching me. Our eyes met, and she gave me a look that wasn't hostile exactly, but it wasn't friendly either. It was more like she was evaluating me, waiting to see what I would do. And then, without warning, she walked over. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. Hannah immediately stiffened beside me, sensing the tension. I forced a polite smile and nodded. "It's fine." Vanessa crouched down closer to the fire, her gaze never leaving mine. "Funny thing about fires," she said softly, almost like she was talking to herself. "They reveal more than people want to show. If you sit close enough, you can hear secrets in the crackling." Her words made no sense, yet they sent a chill down my spine. Later that night, after the bonfire ended and everyone drifted back to the cabins, I stayed behind to help clean up. I was gathering bottles when I noticed movement near the trees. At first, I thought it was just another staff member, but when I squinted through the shadows, I saw Dalton. He wasn't alone. He was talking in low tones to the same man I had seen on the dock with Vanessa. My breath caught. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I caught enough words. Payments, shipment, keep it quiet. Suddenly, it clicked. Vanessa wasn't acting alone. Dalton, the boss who had seemed stern but fair, was somehow involved in whatever this operation was. She wasn't sneaking around him, she was working with him. The realization made my skin crawl. I backed away, heart racing, and almost collided with someone behind me. When I turned, Vanessa was there. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes told me everything. She knew I had just seen more than I should have. "Still curious?" she whispered. I didn't answer, too stunned to form words. She sighed, almost like she was disappointed in me. "I told you to stay out of it. You really should have listened." That night I barely slept, my mind unraveling. If Dalton was involved, it meant there was no safe authority to turn to within the resort. He was the one who could fire me, silence me, discredit me. And Vanessa, whatever role she was playing, wasn't just trying to mess with me for fun. She was protecting something bigger, something she thought I was a threat to. The following day, the resort felt different. Every smile from Dalton seemed forced, every glance from Vanessa carried a warning. Even Hannah noticed my tension and begged me to confide in her, but I couldn't. I was trapped between fear and curiosity, knowing that if I pushed further, I might uncover the truth, but also knowing that each step pulled me deeper into something dangerous. Then came the breaking point. I was cleaning up in the restaurant late one evening when I noticed the black notebook again, only this time. It wasn't hidden in the drawer. It was sitting right on top of the counter in the back office, almost like someone had left it there for me to find. I hesitated, torn between walking away and opening it. Finally, I couldn't resist. This time, I flipped through more pages. Alongside the list of names and amounts were notes, short comments that sent shivers down my spine. Phrases like confirmed delivery, client satisfied, payment complete. And then, one entry that froze me entirely: my own name. Next to it, in neat handwriting, were the words potential liability. The notebook slipped from my hands as I realized what it meant. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was part of their records, part of their plan, and they had already decided how they saw me. My hands shook as I shoved the notebook back onto the desk, my pulse hammering so hard I thought it would echo in the empty office. The word liability repeated in my mind, over and over, like a warning bell I couldn't silence. I knew then that staying quiet was no longer an option. Vanessa and Dalton didn't just see me as an inconvenience, they saw me as a threat. And threats don't get ignored forever. For the rest of that night I pretended to work, but every sound made me jump, every shadow looked like it was moving closer. When my shift finally ended, I hurried to the staff cabins, locked the door, and buried the notebook memory deep in my bag with the warning note I had kept. For the first time all summer, I considered quitting the job entirely, just packing up and leaving. But a stubborn part of me refused. Why should I be the one to run? If anything, I needed to find proof, something undeniable that would expose what they were doing without leaving room for Dalton or Vanessa to twist it against me. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but it felt like walking through quicksand. Vanessa passed me in the hallway, her usual smirk in place, but her eyes lingered on me just a fraction too long, like she was checking whether I had already seen the notebook. Dalton, on the other hand, seemed more cheerful than usual, greeting staff with exaggerated warmth that felt rehearsed. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed his act. But now every word sounded like camouflage. I decided to take a risk and confide in Hannah. We were folding napkins in the prep room when I blurted it out in a low whisper. Something's wrong here. Vanessa's not just messing around, she and Dalton are hiding something. Hannah frowned, setting her napkin aside. What are you talking about? I hesitated, but the fear in my chest made the truth spill faster. I told her about seeing Vanessa in the office at night, about the man on the dock, about the black notebook and the word written next to my name. For a long moment, Hannah didn't say anything. Then she shook her head. That's a lot. Are you sure you're not just stressed and imagining things? Maybe the notebook was just accounting or something. Her doubt stung more than I expected, but deep down, I understood it. If I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed me either. I'm not imagining it, I insisted. Something's happening here, and I'm in danger. Hannah finally sighed. Okay, if you're right, then you can't deal with this alone. You should go to the police. The thought had crossed my mind, but I hesitated. What if they brushed me off? What if Dalton found out before I could show them proof? I needed something more concrete than vague suspicions and a hidden notebook. That chance came sooner than I expected. A week later, another private event was scheduled, a retreat for some wealthy clients who didn't appear on the official guest list. I volunteered to help, hoping I'd get close enough to catch something useful. The night of the retreat, I noticed Dalton and Vanessa slipping into the conference hall with several locked briefcases. My instinct screamed at me to follow, but the doors were guarded by two staff members I didn't recognize, people I had never seen working regular shifts before. I waited until the event ended in the early hours of the morning. Guests filed out, laughing too loudly, their jackets pulled tight around them despite the warm night. When the hall finally emptied, I slipped inside. The tables were covered with half-drunk glasses, expensive cigars, and papers scattered across the floor. Most of it looked ordinary enough, but one crumpled page caught my eye. I picked it up and froze. It wasn't a receipt or a menu, it was a contract. Names I didn't recognize, signatures, figures that made my head spin. This wasn't just about money under the table. This was organized, deliberate, and probably illegal. I shoved the paper into my apron just as footsteps echoed down the hall. My stomach dropped. I ducked behind a curtain, holding my breath as the door creaked open. Through a gap in the fabric, I saw Vanessa walk in, her clutch under one arm. She scanned the room slowly, her eyes sharp, before bending down to pick up a stray folder. For a moment, I thought she hadn't noticed anything missing. But then, as she straightened, she tilted her head and said softly, "You might as well come out. I know you're here." My chest tightened. I didn't move, praying she was bluffing. But then she walked toward the curtain, her heels tapping closer and closer. I panicked and bolted, sprinting out the opposite door, the stolen paper crumpled in my fist. Her voice followed me down the hall, calm but chilling. "You're making a mistake." I didn't stop running until I was back in the cabin, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the paper. I wanted to show it to Hannah, but fear kept me silent. If Vanessa realized I had the document, she wouldn't wait around for me to decide what to do with it. And sure enough, the very next day, Dalton called me into his office. His tone was polite, almost kind, but there was something in his smile that made my stomach twist. He thanked me for my hard work, told me how much he valued my dedication, and then, casually, suggested that maybe I'd prefer to take the rest of the summer off to focus on preparing for school. The message was clear. Leave now, quietly, or risk something worse. I told him I needed the job and refused. His eyes hardened just for a second before his smile returned. "Suit yourself," he said. But as I left his office, I caught sight of Vanessa leaning against the wall outside, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything this time. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any threat. That night, I knew without a doubt, if I didn't act soon, they were going to make sure I never got the chance. I barely slept that night, replaying Dalton's polite dismissal and Vanessa's silent stare. It felt like the walls of the resort were closing in, each hallway hiding a secret, each smile covering a threat. The contract page I had taken was still tucked in my bag, the one piece of proof I had, but it wasn't enough on its own. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed to act fast, before they acted first. The next morning, Hannah cornered me before our shift. "You need to tell me what's going on," she demanded. "I've never seen you this scared. If you don't trust me, at least trust that I can help." Her voice cracked a little at the end, and something in me finally broke. I pulled her into the staff bathroom, locked the door, and handed her the folded paper. Her eyes widened as she read it, scanning the figures and signatures. This isn't just shady bookkeeping," she whispered. "This is illegal. They could go to prison for this." Hearing her say it out loud made it real. My hands trembled as I told her everything: the doc, the notebook, the conversations, Dalton's attempt to push me out. Hannah's face shifted from disbelief to fear to determination. "You can't keep this to yourself," she said firmly. "We have to go to the police." It should have been simple after that. We planned to finish our shifts, sneak into town that evening, and hand over the document. But nothing at the resort was ever simple anymore, because just as we were leaving the restaurant that night, Vanessa was waiting at the back door. She didn't look smug this time, or even angry. She looked almost tired. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice lower than usual. Hannah immediately bristled, stepping between us, but Vanessa shook her head. "You don't understand. You think I'm your enemy, but I'm not." I almost laughed in disbelief. "You've been sabotaging me since the day I got here, leaving me notes, threatening me, and now I'm supposed to believe you're on my side?" Her eyes flashed with something sharp. "I never threatened you. I warned you." "There's a difference." Before I could respond, she leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Dalton's the one you should be afraid of. I've been working undercover to collect proof of what he's doing. That notebook you found? It's not mine, it's his. I've been documenting everything so I can hand it over to the authorities. You stumbling into it made things harder, but also Safer. He can't get rid of you now without raising suspicion. The words hit me like a wave. I stared at her, searching for a lie in her expression, but for the first time all summer, Vanessa's mask seemed gone. She wasn't smirking, she wasn't taunting, she was serious. And then the final piece clicked into place. The man on the dock, the late-night meetings, the lists of clients, it wasn't her scheme. It was Dalton's. She wasn't protecting him. She was investigating him. Hannah's mouth dropped open. You're saying you're what? Some kind of informant? Vanessa gave a small nod. I couldn't tell anyone, not even the staff, or it would blow my cover. But now Dalton knows you're suspicious, which means both of you are in danger. If you really want to stop this, you need to trust me. It felt impossible. After everything she had done to me, every cold glance and twisted game, could I really believe she had been trying to protect me in her own cryptic way? My instinct screamed not to, but deep down, something about her story made sense. Before I could answer, the back door slammed open. Dalton stood there, his smile thin, his eyes sharp as glass. Working late, ladies? He asked smoothly. Vanessa straightened instantly, her face sliding back into its usual confident mask. Just finishing up, she replied. Dalton's gaze flicked between us, lingering on me a second too long. Then he nodded slowly and walked away, but the threat in his silence was louder than words. That was the moment I knew we had no choice. We couldn't wait, couldn't gather more proof. If we didn't act now, Dalton would make sure none of us ever had the chance. That night, the three of us, me, Hannah, and Vanessa, snuck into town. For the first time, I saw a different side of her. She explained in quick whispers how she had been recruited by an agency after a family connection exposed Dalton's operation, how she had been planted at the resort under the guise of a summer job, and how close she was to finally having enough evidence to shut him down. The document I had stolen was the last piece. The next morning, police raided the resort. I wasn't there to see Dalton's face when they led him away in handcuffs, but I heard later that he didn't resist, didn't even argue, as if he had known all along that this day was coming. Staff and guests were shocked, of course, whispering in disbelief, but I wasn't shocked anymore. The weight that had pressed on me all summer finally lifted. When it was over, I stood by the lake with Vanessa. For once, there was no smirk, no challenge in her eyes, just exhaustion, and maybe even gratitude. You weren't supposed to get involved, she admitted quietly, but you handled it better than most. I didn't know how to respond. She wasn't my friend, not really, but she wasn't my enemy either. She had been both at the same time, and maybe that's what made her so unforgettable. As summer ended and I packed to leave for college, I thought back to the girl I had met on the first day of orientation, the one who seemed like she owned the room with her perfect hair and confident smirk. I never would have guessed that behind it all, she was carrying a secret mission. I had thought I was meeting my worst enemy, but in the end, I had met the person who forced me to grow stronger, braver, and more cautious than I had ever been, and that's why, to this day, whenever I think about that summer job, I don't just remember the tips or the long hours or even the beautiful lake. I remember the night I discovered that my enemy was actually the one who saved me.